This is one of my favorite beats. I thought I was doing something wrong when I was getting these rankings ready, and then I finally realized I didn't see so many people that I recognize because it's the freaking bye weeks, which I should have realized as I was going into it, but I'm not smart enough to do these things. I can see that he's talking, but he doesn't know that he's muted during this video and he has to manually unmute himself. This is a new mistake. It obviously comes on right now, but it was really funny because I saw you just kind of talking. What's up, everyone? My name is Matt Savoca at Draftaholic, and we are live on the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel. And I'm here with Andy Francess. Nick Lepre has the day off. I can't believe we actually let him out of the basement there. But apparently he's working on 80 different things today. So you will see him over on the Notorious Fantasy channel. But my man, Andy Francess, is back this morning. Follow him at Andy Francess. How are you today?
Oh, see, you think that I was muted unintentionally and just trying to talk to you, and I didn't know what was going on. I talk to myself
that was my
all the time, and I am like Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man. I look at the mirror, I'm talking to myself all day long. So if I'm muted and you see me just having a conversation with myself like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, don't get alarmed. That's just me on a Wednesday.
Precious. And speaking of precious, a lot of precious running backs unavailable to us because of...
Look at this guy with those transitions. My guy, get him on TNT.
It's bye week hell, guys. It's really tough. No Christian McCaffrey, no Najee Harris, no Saquon Barkley, no Zeke or Tony Pollard. None of the 8 million Denver running backs that now include Chase Edmonds, who was moved at the trade deadline as part of that Bradley Chubb deal. But ultimately, we got some deals to break down because it was an exciting day for running backs, specifically a bunch of them on the move. Zach Moss, Naheem Hines as well. And then we got some new people in new situations. We're going to talk about the Bills. We're going to talk about the Dolphins. But let's just bring up tier one because these are the players you probably aren't benching. And people like when we get to the rankings right away. That's what we found out, Andy. We already have some questions rolling in. Ron the Goat, good morning, fellow degenerates. We salute you, Ron the Goat. How are you?
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that they would want to get that up there right away. I feel like even if you don't even talk about them, at least they just want that screen. They just want to see names so that they can go, all right, my fantasy week is underway. I see names. Yeah.
It's the momentum. Yeah. It's the motion. It's the movement that reminds us we're all living life. We're all moving forward. Hey, Josh Reacts is here. Exciting about the Phillies going up 2-1 in game 3. Oof, that Bryce Harper home run was a smash in the first inning. They never looked back. All right, we'll get to some more questions. I see Miso in the chat. Good morning, guys. Tyron, you're here too. How are you, man? Tier 1, obviously absent are some names that I just mentioned because of the buys, but let's talk about number 4, Travis Etienne. He's the dude in Jacksonville with James Robinson in New York now. The others we're pretty much unsuspecting. Nothing surprises us at this point with tier 1. Josh Jacobs, maybe if you just woke up from under a rock 4 weeks ago. But Travis Etienne, how do you feel about this going against the Raiders, who gave up 24 points and scored 0 last week against the Saints?
I just want to note, so I would never have Etienne in any of my leagues because I am wholeheartedly against drafting somebody who it's a young player and there's a chance you're going to have to wait till week 7 or 8 or 9 till the breakout or the job replacement comes. I'm talking about like Javonte Williams last year or any rookie who, like Jonathan Taylor, his rookie year. These guys end up breaking out, and then they retroactively create the narrative that it was such as a league where, well, if I told you to draft DeAndre Hopkins, you get him rounds later because he's not going to be available the first 7 weeks. These people who had ETN week 3, 4, 5, they're at that like, all right, we got to probably bench him. So I actually stand by me not drafting him because many people are out of their leagues at that point. I'm
going to push back a little bit, Andy. I'm going to actually push back because first round and second round running back talent is
these people are so pissed off that I went on this.
The viewership, it's plummeting. No. I'm going to push back a little bit. I think that first and second round running backs that have particular athletic traits, even in situations that aren't good, are worth betting on to a modest amount in your fantasy leagues, because we see situations every year where Rashad Penny gets injured and Kenneth Walker becomes the dude, where James Robinson gets traded in the first round running back from last year, Travis Etienne becomes the dude, where Marlon Mack gets injured and Jonathan Taylor becomes the dude. The uncertainty of fantasy football is what I'm arguing here, not the certainty of the player.
It's all about correct, but the difference between Kenneth Chalker is that you didn't have to invest a lot in him. You had to draft Etienne high. You had to draft Taylor high. You had to draft Trey Sermon pretty high. And there are a lot of those because the fantasy community, they can't help themselves but fiending over the new toy. They were trying to say, and the thing is, everybody, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. Look, you forget this coffee. This woke me up. They go nuts over these players during the summer just because they haven't been seen in the NFL. Trey Sermon was going to be the biggest star. Forget about Mostert, despite the fact that he ran for 220 yards versus like the Packers in the NFC Championship. No. You want Mostert. Forget about the old guy. And the same thing with Javonte Williams. Oh, it's Javonte Williams season, week 8. No, but just wait, week 10. No, actually, it never happened. And many times you're investing, like I'm talking about when you have to invest high in somebody. The calculated gambles, of course, no problem with those. It's when, you're drafting them high and now all of a sudden you're waiting till week 8. Jonathan Taylor was like week 10 or 11 that he finally got the job. And by that time you're out of the playoffs. So that's really my only point. That has nothing to do with any of this. He obviously looked great, and he has that ability where if he's getting a bunch of touches, he can take anyone to the house because of his explosive ability. And you saw what Kamara did to Vegas last week. And
Travis Etienne might be right behind him. Absolutely.
Especially. And what's
Oh, sorry. You finish your thought.
Absolutely. And what's encouraging is Kamara is one of those skinny type of running backs, and he hasn't been able to really dominate. Actually, he didn't dominate them on the ground either, right? He only had like 50-something yards, but he had over like 100 receiving with a couple of touchdowns. It doesn't matter because also, A, they saw that game tape. B, they need to win. C, he's a great receiver just like Kamara is. So the makings are there for him to have an unbelievable game. So,
and I think Etienne is one of those players too, who, man, I guess we should just play in some more leagues, Andy Francess, because I'm one of those players who right around the 5th round, if I'm drafting enough floor and ceiling combination players, I will take a pure upside play in the first.
Yeah, but he's going before the 5th round in a 12
So
team
I said this during the draft season. I said, you get one. In the first 5 rounds, you need to draft players who you need them to meet their expectations. You have already essentially seen them done what you need them to do based on the opportunity cost. But you get one player in that first 5 rounds who hasn't done it yet, but has the ceiling to be a league winner. You don't get 3, you don't get 4, you get 1. It's in the 3rd round.
The problem is, I can't pull these out of my ass, but there's definitely a ton of them. You just said that he's going to be. We've seen this a million times where, this guy, he's in college, he ran back, and then he can't do anything in the pros. Etienne got injured before the season started. We never saw him on a field. So you had to hope that he is what he is. Now, he is, but like I said, there are many instances, and I'm sure as this show goes on, I'll think of them, where people invested highly in someone who theoretically had this ceiling, when other guys who maybe have been in the league 1 or 2 years, but they're just not as sexy anymore, had just the same amount of upside without the gamble, or maybe not as much upside, maybe 85% of the upside without the pure gamble of, looking at Etienne's frame, you don't know if he's one of those guys who as soon as he's gets touched around the line of scrimmage, he goes down because he's so skinny. These are questions that many times.
No, I'm going to cut you off, man. I'm going to say we're going to have to do this during the offseason, and we're going to have you on.
Who's number 2 on your screen?
Episode.
Who's number 2 on your screen?
Hold on. We're going to do this at the end of the offseason. We're going to look at the number of running back 1 through 12 in terms of points per game in fantasy scoring, and how many of them are age 26 and younger. I know some of the answers going into this season. I know that the hit rates for players 27 and older are hilariously low. Like it falls off an absolute cliff, which means that
That's fair.
it is a shiny new toy. So there is a shiny new toy problem that you're talking about, but it's because so much of the fantastic league-winning running back seasons happen for players who have only been in the league a few years. So if you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle, it might be year 1. It's just as likely that it's year 2 or year 3. So to your point, you're absolutely right for players like Jonathan Taylor. Trying to guess in season-long fantasy football, whether it's year 1 or year 2, is the fool's errand. But to pretend it doesn't happen, to pretend there isn't a year 1 hit rate is also a mistake.
Remember, I didn't say that. I said by the time they've earned the job and the coach's trust, you might be out of the playoffs because it's week 8, or in Jonathan Taylor's case, week 10. And if you look at number 2 on your list,
I'm getting fired up.
If you look at number 2 on your list,
he got injured. Marlon Mack got injured in quarter 1 of week 1.
Yeah, and he still couldn't get the job till week 10. They were giving it to Wilkins and freaks that they promoted from the practice squad. I remember that year. I forgot the guy's name. But on the Thursday night against Texas, he was their lead back. Oh, what was his name? He was a pure freak. They wouldn't even give it to Taylor. And then at the end, and there was Hines rotated.
And there was Hines.
But then if you look at number 2 on your list, look at Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is a guy who's averaging. And I think this was one of the first videos I did for your fantasy football channel, and you can see it back there. I said Miles Sanders averages the same amount of yards per carry for his career as Aaron Jones and only trails Nick Chubb. That's it for career yards per carry. He's playing behind the number 1 offensive line, and he's not worth the risk down in the bunkers. And look at how he's produced. Josh Jacobs, contract year. Everyone hate. Oh yeah, the Hall of Fame game. Oh yeah, he's first quarter. Like there's just as much opportunity there if you make calculated sniffs, as I like to call them on the OddsShopper channel with my hockey bets. Calculated sniffs. That Sanders one, I don't know how that's not worth the flyer, because you don't have to invest and you get like running back 2 upside. But let's go to these tier 1, because someone's just, I don't care though. Some guy in Cincinnati's freaking out because I'm going on a tangent about. I mean, this should be relevant to them too. I bet you they're on both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm. I just think there's room for upside in your first 5 rounds to just eliminate that because of the anecdotal response that you might be out of it, is to forego. It's going against everything I know about fantasy football, which is we have hit rates, we have percentages, we can nail down what the chances this player hits their opportunity cost, and we just draft based on opportunity, talent, and situation from there. Aaron Jones is a great play. That's the only thing that I wanted to add as we move on to tier 2. Putting him number 1, I think, is bullish, but that's how the Stokastic projections, the same ones that help DFS players and sports bettors win literally millions of dollars every single year. Players like Alex Awesome Baker, the number 1 DFS player in the world, using these same projections to power his NFL lineups. Follow us over at the Stokastic DFS channel as well. Ultimately, Jones, who's had 2 fantastic explosive performance, now gets an amazing matchup against Detroit in the Dome. Yeah, I think that's going to be a really fun game. All these players you're starting. Tier 2 is where it gets fun. Ramondre to Raheem. This is what I call the great flattening, Andrew. Andrew.
But that's my name.
That's your name. But you're Andy. You're Andy to me. But ultimately, this is a situation where our projections start to flatten, and they look very similar when you look at floor and ceiling. And so we have to look at who has better ceilings, who has lower floors. And so we can try to create some risk assessments that the rankings may not be able to show us with just a number. A couple players I want to mention. Devin Singletary, you still got him in the top 15 after this trade for Nyheim Hines?
Well, if you've seen, you're a stats guy, so you probably know closer to the exact percentage, but part of the reason I bet on a Devin Singletary receiving prop versus the Chiefs was because in games versus the way I just call them as teams that you really want to beat, like playoff caliber teams, aka games that you really need to win and you know they're going to be competitive, Devin Singletary is getting a ton of the work. And then against teams where you almost know that they're going to blow him out and they're going to almost bring back his workload to save them for the more important games. Yeah. So I was all about Devin Singletary, prop bets in that Kansas City game. And in this case, I don't like it because with the way the Jets offense goes, and do you know how much the Buffalo's favored by? Roughly,
it's like 2 touchdowns. You had to guess? I believe it's 13 and a half.
So to me, that's a little hint saying if there's a beating, you're not getting a lot of Singletary. If it's in within one score, that's Vegas telling you, all right, well, this is probably going to be a close game, a game that when they're in close games, you're getting more Singletary. When you're getting blowouts, they're using James Cook and whatnot. But Hines, we just have to see how he's utilized. But I would be more concerned about opponent and getting up big because then that's when they bring his usage down.
So I thought that Singletary was going to be used exactly how you were saying. But listen to these target totals. 5 against Kansas City, 2 against Green Bay. 5 against Baltimore, 2 against Pittsburgh. 11 against Miami, 3 against Tennessee. So if you think the Jets defense is one of their better spots, I worry that this is one of those games where Singletary gets work on the ground in ways that we've seen the last 2 weeks. 17 carries 2 weeks ago, 14 carries. Before the bye, 14 carries the week before that. I think 15 touches are still in his range.
They played the Packers, right? They played the Packers and the Chiefs in the 2 games you're referring to. What I'm saying is if they throw them a beating, then it's every other, they rotate series.
Okay.
Like when they get
that makes sense.
Because they really do like Singletary, and that's evidenced by when they played the Chiefs. It's a 1-score game the whole time. He's not coming off the field. And then as soon as they get leads on it, here comes Cook. It makes sense. You want to scale back the workload and save the running back that you do need and that you do trust the most down the stretch. So I guess it's a question of, do you think the Jets keep this close? Because if you're if you're that guy who goes to baseball games with his own stat card, I can never understand who's doing that and what are you doing with those game notes afterward. But if you are one of those people, if you are one of those people and Buffalo goes up 2 touchdowns, keep track of how much Singletary plays after that and store that for future use. All right.
That's actually a great thing. We should look up the splits when they're up more than 10 points. Especially with a team like the Bills, who actually finds themselves in that particular game script more often than most teams.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the middle parts here. Dameon Pierce is one of the bright spots of the Houston Texans. There aren't many, but he has a incredibly tough defensive matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. They should get smacked. That game should not be run heavy for Houston for very long. Miles Sanders on the other side. I think you should just flip these rankings.
Well, so Houston got smacked last week, and Tennessee's defense played great. But all of a sudden, if you're in PPR, Pierce got that touchdown at the end. True. He had a few catches, and he's that kind of guy because Rex Burkhead's so bad, like he's not going to be able to really churn out yards for them. The utilization, he can do what he did that game efficiency-wise, yet still produced enough for you to be fine with how much, what you need from him. And the flip side is any other game where he's getting like 20-something carries and he's making the most of them. You've seen these runs, these Marshawn Lynch-esque runs, and he's clearly their best player. And their coach has said he's got to be getting at least 20 carries a game.
Yeah.
On the other side, what if there's an absolute beating? You're going to get that freaking Eagles rotation, the one that frustrates you early in the year with, like, if they're up a couple scores, which I'm sure they're double-digit favorites in this
13
one, right?
13.5 right now.
There you go. You think they're going to commit to Sanders all game like they did against a couple weeks back, who they play at home when Sanders had like 140 and 2 touchdowns. Who was that? Damn it.
Was it Jacksonville?
Yes, the reigning king
yards
versus Jacksonville. And this was when Jacksonville got respect because they had won a couple games, and then they got a pick 6 early in that game, and they were up, and the Eagles had to that game. So kind of just like that Singletary thing, they left Sanders as their primary running back, and there was no Bart Scott active during that game. Boston Scott.
Bart Scott. I was like, what?
Boston Scott.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
And so it was just him in Gainwell, so he got a ton of work. In a game like this, if they're crushing him, like I would still pick Pierce to outscore Sanders in this one because he's going to be on the field all game. Sanders in a game versus Houston, a bad team. They didn't end up trading for a running back. Same type of thing like I said about Singletary. These teams are smarter now about saving the wear and tear on the guys they really want before making their push. And another guy on that list, Fournette, I think it's no coincidence. That's why you see his workload scaled back. Even though they're struggling, they have playoff aspirations, and they know if they run Fournette to the ground and he's not there, they're screwed.
It's true. They need something to work in Tampa Bay. They are just all out of sorts. I don't think we can predict when or if this thing will turn around. This may be going into the ground.
How wild is it, though? It doesn't need to with that division. That division's so bad that they can go on a 3-game win streak at the end of the year, end up around 500, get a home game, one win because that's a team
and then they're right in the divisional round
went the whole way.
Them. Yeah, I know. It's so annoying. It's like those mediocre Patriots teams that didn't have to do much work to get into the playoffs either. For all those years,
but
Jets, Bills and Dolphins were floundering.
Yeah, but they did pretty good once they got there.
They sure did. They sure did. And it's what you do in January and February that defines your legacy. Not for our fantasy teams, though. One player I want to mention as we move on to Tier 3 here, Raheem Mostert, playing against the 24th-ranked Bears rush defense, should have the first crack of having that backfield all to himself. And Miami's a good team. They love to pass. So in the same way, I can't rank them much higher than 15, like Devin Singletary. They do look like a strong play rest of season. Do you disagree?
Well, I honestly say I would be more concerned now about. I was a big Mostert guy, one of those running backs you can draft all the way at the end and is given up RB2 value, but those don't exist, right? And that wasn't to you, that was to the ether. But Mostert, they brought in Jeff Wilson. They're bringing the old Niners stat, the running backs that they want. I had no worry that Edmonds was going to come in any one of these weeks and take work away. But I know they like Wilson because they're just getting the old band back together. The Mostert. Well, so I'm scared now that it's going to be 1 out of every 3 series is going to be Wilson because Wilson's looked great as a runner this year. And, the history with Mostert's knees, I mean, that guy couldn't stay. It's pretty impressive that he stayed healthy this long, by the way. If you look how frequently he's been injured since that big year with the Niners.
Yeah.
I mean, it took him 3 carries last year, and he was out for the year. And
he's so good, though. He was going to be such a great play against Detroit.
He was my favorite. He was my favorite. Mostert had the highest yards per carry in the history of the league. And I remember that, and I drafted him so much because I knew Shanahan, and we got screwed.
Injuries suck, and they happen the most to running backs, of course. We'll move on to Tier 3 here, and I do want to ask an interesting question that Ron the Goat. Ron the Goat, you're always in here, always hanging out, always making the chat better. Appreciate you a lot, man. Would you rather own Mostert, who we just saw at the end of this list, or James Conner, who's right smack in the middle of this list, ranked this week at number 22?
Do we assume health?
Yeah, we assume that. I mean, here's what it is. He's got one roster. He wants to know who he would rather have on his roster. We can't assume health. We have to assume all the uncertainty we all assume in fantasy football.
Well, the problem is, that Miami offense, when Tua's playing, they're moving the ball. They're putting up points. They have a crafty play caller who clearly likes Mostert. That's a nice combo to have. On the other side, you have Connor returning to his original injury-prone Pittsburgh Steelers form. That offense, it's gotten a little better, I will say, since Hopkins has come back. At least it looks like it's able to move the ball. But what have we seen from him this year? It appears that little stretch last year might be the outlier in the whole Connor spectrum here. Because to me, he looks like he's back to Pittsburgh Steelers. He's not.
When healthy, he is, right?
Well, how did he look early in this season?
So we've only had 3 games this season where James Conner has had more than a 60% snap share. 10 rushes, 6 targets in the first one, 13 rushes, 5 targets in the next one, 9 rushes, 1 target. 15 rushes, 3 targets in that last one. So 18 opportunities per game for an Arizona Cardinals offense is pretty darn good. But I'm sick of that.
Absolutely.
Right now, Mostert is the healthier back. So that's the way I'm going to look.
And he's producing.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to me about why we have Aaron Jones at number 1.
Get A.J. Dillon miles out of this lineup.
Okay, all right. Why? And I'm going to be right back. I just heard a buzz. I will be right back.
Go ahead. I'll tell them why. I'm a schizophrenic. I don't need anybody to talk to. You guys crazy? A.J. Dillon this whole season. If it wasn't for the fantasy community, he'd still be called what he is, a backup. But like I said, they got to keep anointing the newer guy, the younger guy. Jones is done. It's all. No, you have a plotting back. That's what A.J. Dillon is. A non-PPR worthy plotting back who gets 35 to 4, and he's not running all those wheel routes like Aaron Jones. He's a touchdown dependent, like I said over the summer, script dependent. Only in games when the Packers are up are they going to truly utilize him to eat some clock and churn out first downs. How many games have they been up in so far? Not getting it as much as you used to, and he's a waste. I don't think much about Gus Edwards either. But I will say this, Jonathan Taylor on this list. I know Taylor has screwed most people, but Nyheim Hines ain't going to be there anymore, which just means even a few more snaps. As long as I know they taped up that ankle, but he was able to get, I think, over 70 yards last week. I know he had one goal line chance, but you got to think with this kid in there, they're going to rely on him even more. We briefly mentioned this when I think Nick said he wasn't about that. Jonathan Taylor, if you were able to navigate your way through the year and you still have him or you traded for him, I think there's going to be some good weeks down the stretch. Remember, you're only kind of halfway through the season. You can't just flush everything out. There's still time for him to turn it around. And when you talk about upside, we've seen his massive upside. He's someone at 20 that, I still see some solid finishes for him given, what's around him. They're going to ride him. I can't
warrant Jonathan Taylor being this low, man. This one really grinds my gears. First of all, I realize he's not playing Tennessee. That's a mistake on my part. Sorry about that. He is playing New England this week. And ultimately, I think he sees a 75% snap share or more. I think he sees 17 to 22 opportunities with Nyheim Hines gone. And now I actually think that Jonathan Taylor can be an every down back with Hines out. I actually think they've paved the way for him to be more Christian McCaffrey-esque rest of season. And I would have him top 15 for sure this week and every week.
Yeah, I will say, he had to leave that last game. Something tells me he rushed back from a high ankle sprain. He only missed 2 games, and they say that's supposed to be a 4 to 6 week injury. Then early in this first half, he had to leave the game. I saw them put tape on him. You got to see how much tape they put on it. It went out 10 feet each way, but he was able to come back in that game. I would just monitor those practice reports and see how healthy he is. But I'm all about him in the second half of the year. I know the offensive line's kind of garbage, but I do know. I remember last year when they played San Fran on it was around Christmas Eve. It was like a Thursday night game, I believe. And they were missing 3 members of their offensive line. And he still went off and he still scored a touchdown. And he should be one of those guys who through the immense usage is going to be able to have good games regardless.
Absolutely. Now, David Montgomery, Tyler Algier, Jamal Williams, they make up the boring running backs who we can't really say they're not going to get volume. Do you have a favorite here, 16, 17, 18, or would you rather take the upside of DeAndre Swift? I already know the question.
Well, Swift got very minimal usage last week. They said they're going to start to ramp it up. And if they do, then that will kind of handicap Jamal Williams' upside, and they're going to eat into each other's upside. And David Montgomery, didn't he lose a lot of work to Khalil Herbert, who looks light years faster than him, like truly light years faster than him? You know what? That is one of the weirdest 4-person bets that I don't know what I would do in. I don't know who I would pick. I might. Oh, and then the Chargers' awful run defense. My God. You know what? Rather than lie to you, I'm going to say, I don't know. I might take Swift hoping he takes a screen to the house or something.
I think if I'm looking at just the combination of expected volume and efficiency, I can't believe I'm saying that Tyler Algier is legitimately a choice.
I was leaning
Swift
towards
is
that.
The best player. I know, it's bizarre because Atlanta, they lose games. Well, they won last week, but they do so scoring more points than you would actually think. So ultimately, I do think that there's some floor and ceiling built in.
Yeah.
Donta Foreman, less floor, less ceiling than last week with Chuba Hubbard likely to play, but decent matchup against Cincinnati. I do want to mention our sponsor here as we hit the bottom of the hour, though, because we have a lot of ways that you could bet on the NFL this week because it's such a weird week. But why don't you do that with a significantly bigger bankroll over at BetMGM than you think you could put in? So here's what you do. We have a link in the video description. You click that link and you bet a pregame moneyline NBA bet. Did you hear me there? A pregame moneyline NBA bet. Here's the reason why. If any team in the entire NBA hits a three-pointer the same night you put that $10 initial pregame moneyline bet, you get $200 in your account. So you turn 10 immediately into 200. Boom, you're set for Sunday. You can start making these bets at a significantly higher bankroll than you could otherwise. It's a great way to get started. It's a great platform to play on. Other than New York, Missouri, and Pennsylvania, because they don't want them in on the fun. This is like one of the best offers I've seen from any sports book at any time. Get started today. Again, that link is in the video description below.
Yeah, the New York is a personal insult to me because, I took them for their hats during the NHL playoffs, so then they started stripping promotions from my fellow New Yorkers. So sorry about that. I'll take blame for it.
We're going to move on to tier 4 here, just as we got to get out of here pretty soon. Unfortunately, it's going fast this Wednesday morning. This tier 4 is small, right? This is I think I can flex these players tier, but after this, it's the I feel sorry for you and below tier at the running back position. Antonio Gibson has a decent possible shootout against Minnesota, whose defense has just been mediocre despite being a 6-1 team. Michael Carter has competition for touches, and that team is entirely inefficient. Isaiah Pacheco is the highest ranking Chiefs running back for us. He's at 27. And then we just kind of hope and prayer kind of running backs who need efficiency because they're certainly not going to see all the volume on their own teams. Damian Harris, Brian Robinson, and Khalil Herbert. I
will say if there's reason to be excited for one of these guys, it would be Damian Harris. I predicted last week. I said take your fair share of Stevenson props, and then don't get too excited when you see him have the majority of the snap share when you're rushing someone back from a hamstring injury, because Damian Harris didn't miss a lot of time. Look at Keenan Allen, how he tried to come back from a hamstring injury. Look what happened to him. You obviously were not going to see a high snap percentage for Damian Harris in his first game back from a hamstring injury.
That's true.
That each week that goes by after that, you're going to see them meet back in the middle. But, people, they think that just like Belichick is like a fantasy. Like, now no, what he's trying to do is save the hamstring of the guy he normally prefers as his lead back, his goal line back. And that's the correct thing to do. And you're going to watch them meet to the middle, the further this gets away from that and the healthier he feels.
I think there's a chance that Ramondre literally runs away with this thing. I do.
Belichick would no, not a chance. Belichick will not turn his back on somebody who's played well for him like that. He just won't, He's never done that. It's not like he's played poor. Harris has been the exact guy that Belichick, like, churning out yards, hard runs, never complains. Good.
He's never run for more than 5 yards a carry since week 1, 4.7 yards per carry, 3.7 yards per carry, 4.6 yards per carry, 2.7, 2.6, 3.6. It's just
but he's in there for all the predictable runs. He's in there for all those predictable first, second down runs. And look, I'm not making the argument for the player. I'm making the Belichick argument. Like, I will guarantee you he's not going to turn his back on him when you see how, like, when you think about the Patriots winning, look how they played last year. It was the majority. Harris with Stevenson worked in great because he has that burst, that perfect change of pace burst, and now he's added the passing work. So now it makes full sense. When things are right, you're churning out in between tackles with Harris, then change of pace with Stevenson and use him as your receiving back. And it's honestly, if you're a football coach, it's a good 1-2 punch, not a fantasy coach.
Well, they should care more about my fantasy team, Bill Belichick. They should.
I like Bill. Bill's one of the last miserable guys left in the league, and I mean, his press conferences are all the entertainment I could ever ask for. But he's been too kind in them recently. Like, I used to love when he really when they lost that game in overtime versus the Jets. Hey Bill, what happened? What happened in overtime there? He just goes, they won. That was his answer, or whatever it was.
So good.
So good.
Hey, we got a question from Dominic. Don't worry, Dominic. Nick will be back tomorrow. Start Mostert or Swift?
You got to go Mostert.
Me too. Yeah.
Just the usage.
Benny, what does this mean? Gus is going to be a goalie back?
Goal line.
Oh, it's like goalie back? You're going to block people from scoring? Well, in a way, maybe.
A goalie back. A goal. I'm trying to think of what that could be. Yeah, but definitely goal line back. That's what he's talking about.
Isaiah Pacheco and the Kansas City Chiefs are nearly 2 touchdown favorites, or at least 10.5. I think it sits at right now. Can we trust Pacheco right now? He is technically the starting running back, but he was outscored in fantasy by Clyde Edwards-Helaire since that has been announced. He had 9 half PPR fantasy points, which makes him a viable flex, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and wouldn't you say when they're big favorites, that's when someone like him is actually going to get a good amount of work?
Yeah, I would.
Like that Buffalo game, that's probably a less of an indicator because usually they're playing in games where they're able to get up and run more. That probably is that what he hit in his last game?
Sorry, who?
Pacheco?
Pacheco had 9 fantasy points, 30% snap share, 40
against the number 1 defense in the league, right? That's what Buffalo is. That's not bad. 9.1 points against the number 1 defense, and now you're a 2 touchdown favorite. I think it could be a pretty good spot for him.
Tyron has a question here. I'm going to move to tier 5 since we only got a few minutes left on this Wednesday show. Also, unfortunately, guys, running back 30 through 40 is a dead zone. This is not a place you'd want to be. This is where I'd much rather start wide receiver 30 through 45 than anyone in running back 30 through 45. I understand that some of us are here right now in bye week hell. Tyron asks, good morning, boys. This guy in my league has Saquon, Henry, and CNC, but only Danny Dimes at QB. Do you think he'd trade one of those running backs for Tua and CEH? If so, which one should I target? If you can get any of these 3, chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Any of them. It doesn't matter. If you're asking me which one I want, Saquon, and then CMC, and then Henry, just because of the quality of the offense and the quality of the volume. And then CMC is the quality and efficiency in the offense. And then Henry is just pure volume.
Typically, nobody will trade. No, people
right.
do not like trading a good player for a quarterback where you can normally go on waivers, play a good matchup or something like that. I don't think they'll be able to take it. And I was going to ask you, if we had to make like a random bet on this tier 5, we had to bet who had the most points. If you had to take one stab at these players, who would you go with to outscore the rest of them?
Kenyon Drake. I think Kenyon Drake actually may have played his way into a role. I know Gus Edwards is expected back this week, but Kenyon Drake, every time he's been the lead guy for Baltimore this year, which is twice, he's produced and produced effectively. So ultimately, I do think that's my solid floor ceiling combination. I still think one of these Chiefs backs not named Pacheco may emerge, and having Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon 35-36 feels like a little bit of a hedge this early in the week with our rankings.
Yeah, I would probably go Edwards-Helaire. When looking at this list, I'd probably go Helaire.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, but I'm also disappointed in myself that I took the chalky easy selection. But I mean, to me, he's kind of different than the rest of these guys. Like, he has a decent amount of guaranteed touches in a great offense. We've seen him produce. Some of these other guys,
right?
Jesus,
he keeps getting red zone passing opportunities. It's gonna go well for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He had 9 fantasy points last week as well. We'll close things out with a question from our boy Miso. Gallup, Moore, Palmer are my bench wide receiver options. Do I drop one for Ridley? Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, my guess is
is this a dynasty question?
It's probably a keeper league. It's probably a something like that. That's the only reason he would ask that.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm going to leave this one to you.
Or Calvin Ridley in a keeper league? Okay, so I would keep Gallup, Moore, and if it is a keeper league, I'll take Calvin Ridley over Josh Palmer right now.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a difficult. I mean, the odds of you have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams signed to deals. I mean, what are the odds that Palmer somehow becomes a guy worthy of having on your roster for multiple years?
I mean, he's a 3rd-round pick. It's not impossible. We've seen day 2 wide receivers hit, but I'd rather have the 1st-rounder who just got traded.
Yeah. But I mean, it just seems like a hard path for, take the path that doesn't require climbing 2 Pro Bowl guys.
That Williams, who signed a contract, and Allen, who's not going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. You guys, the running back position gets so bad so fast, but that's why we had to break it down. The top 41 running backs of week 9. There they are for you. This has been a whole lot of fun, Andy. I really like that debate about rookie and young running backs and having to take high opportunity costs. We're going to have to come back to that conversation. Bring the stats. We'll bring in Lepre as well. We will, of course, have Nick Lepre here on Thursday. Oh, you want to add one more thing for the
I was going to say next summer, because then I could tell you the type of ones that, because it's not a blanket rule. It's one where I don't like passing on people who high in the draft. That's what I'm talking about.
I hear you, but the debate will absolutely rage on. This has been so fun. Follow him at Andy Francess. I'm at Draftaholic. Guys, that BetMGM offer, we are not joking. One of the best we have ever seen come through. If you have any questions, message me at Draftaholic. I can help you make a solid bet to get you started. We'll be back tomorrow, me and Nick, talking wide receivers, talking week 9. Guys, this is where champions are made. Stay locked in. Let's get that championship. See you guys later.